Hi, thank you everyone very much for joining us. I'm Erica. Big thanks to TrueLayer for sponsoring the crypto exchange series looking at the present and future of crypto exchanges, specifically in the UK. Big thanks to Maria Stankevich, Chief Business Development Officer from EXMO, and IanTaylor from Crypto UK. Ian always needs no introduction, so very, very grateful to both of you for joining us and excited to be here. So, I mean, first of all, just first question, what have you seen as the main trends, the main themes, and the main sort of questions, topics, challenges looking at crypto exchanges in the last year? Maria, quickly over to you. You're coming from the hot seat of an exchange.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you. Yes, I would name, the Binance case, probably one of the most powerful cases in the previous year. Mm-hmm. I mean, the case when, the governments started blocking them and started talking to them in terms of the compliance and AML. So I would say that, for us as an exchange that is fully compliant was a good sign. And, that's not only because the Binance is a competitor, for sure not. But I mean, like last year, we were definitely in an uneven situation when we were doing all the compliance checks and AML procedures, and we were requesting source of funds from our users. And of course, if there were any other exchange that was not was there because it was easier for them, and the liquidity and the commissions were the same. So for us, this case meant a lot because we've seen that users started thinking of that also from different kind of perspective. So I would name Binance case probably the most powerful one. And of course, another one is the whole process with FCA. So FCA, they didn't sort of do much. I would say that in terms of the putting the exchanges to the permanent list. So we do have the temporary list at the moment, but I think we all kind of hoped that this year will become a very big one, a very powerful one for the UK crypto sphere, but it didn't happen. And I think that even it wasn't positive, but it actually influenced a lot because many exchanges, including us, we had the plan B, and we went to different regulations to Gibraltar, to Malta, and so forth, so on.
Amazing, and thank you. And Ian, what about you? I mean, what have you seen as the main highlights looking back at specifically focusing on crypto exchanges over the last year, over 2021, specifically around AML and KYC?
Thank you very much for having me on, Erica. Pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for joining us.
Gosh, 2021, how much time do we have? I can't really give you everything that's happened in the last year. It's been pretty exponential in terms of development growth, not just in the policy space, but also in the adoption, market participant growth, and really crypto hitting mainstream. So just to try and keep it relatively focused and succinct, 2021, I think Maria touched on it. We saw some enforcement action in the UK around Binance. We've also seen some other enforcement action overseas, especially in the States around BitMEX, some big fines coming out of the US. And this is all focused mainly around money laundering and economic crime. Most policymakers have made this their priority, and naturally so. Most of the industry has no problem with making sure that illicit finance is halted. Bitcoin and other crypto assets generally have a bad reputation, and I believe personally, and we do at Crypto UK, this is a misnomer, and we're doing a lot of work with government to try and change that narrative. We saw the IPO of Coinbase, so that was the first public listing, valuing that business at some 70 or 80 billion. So I know Maria mentioned Binance, so we could argue that their valuation, if they ever did IPO, which is highly unlikely, would be significantly greater. And also we've seen some really large valuations, FTX. So some of these exchanges are really grown into absolute monsters and behemoths of business. And just sort of to wrap it up in terms of the policy and the regulation, we have in the UK the money laundering regime, which is taking a heck of a long time, and it's fraught with a lot of issues, both in terms of the market participants not necessarily knowing how to be regulated, because it's the first piece of regulation we've seen, but also at the regulator not having the right level of resource, not understanding business models, and we've seen a lot of lack of continuity around staff there. But we believe and hope that that's improving. We've seen some additional companies added to the register in the last few months, so that's in process. And I think I'll just finish up on something very relevant and a hot topic for us is Financial Action Task Force and the travel rule. Consultation just closed in the UK regarding this, which we responded to. And this is going to impact all VASPs or trading exchanges and other service providers will have to improve or change their processes to ensure that customer information is sent when they send a transfer to another exchange and collected by the receiving exchange.
No, thank you. And what do you see? We'll start with you, Ian, just going forward into the next year, into 2020. What do you see as being the sort of the main things coming specifically regarding AML and KYC? I mean, speaking to a lot of the crypto companies is one of the challenges they struggle with, just how to get this sorted and how to go about it. And obviously now we're also seeing the rise of things like blockchain and crypto analytics companies and providers in this space. What do you see as coming next? And will this be easier for exchanges and crypto companies going forward to address?
So next year there'll be additional regulation, and I touched on the travel rule. We're just at consultation stage. So what we've advocated for is a passive piecemeal approach for policymakers, because it's not particularly easy for lots of market participants to do what's being asked of them in terms of collecting this data. So that will come down the pipe. So companies will have to start becoming compliant. However, we have this issue where, for example, in Singapore, they've already, the government and the regulator, Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, has already requested that exchanges and VASP capture this data. So we see this, if you like, it's called the sunrise problem. So it's companies that want to send a transfer from Singapore to, say, a non-compliant country like the UK right now will not. And that's a problem. We don't want the UK to be left behind where it can't transact globally. So that's an issue. That's why we're advocating for this sort of more balanced piecemeal approach from the UK policymakers. There'll be additional regulations, not just focused on KYC in AML. We know stable tokens will be regulated, financial promotions will be regulated in the UK in 2022. And from our conversations with the FCA, we know that they're looking at other aspects, for example, market integrity and market surveillance. So I would urge all exchanges to start thinking about this, perhaps better disclosures, what are the risks involved, clearer pricing strategies for their consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think just finally, just to focus on the question on AML, I hope that we see a greater permeation of using the technology. You talked about blockchain analytics companies. The whole idea of blockchain is it's public. So you can see all the transactions. And what we have is the ability as an industry, not only with some of the interesting work going on in cryptography, with zero knowledge proofs, is to be able to use the blockchain technology to actually fight crime better than traditional financial institutions. And that's some of the work we're developing as well. And I please urge your listeners to read our consultation. It's a wee bit dry, but there's some information in there regarding this stuff, and there's some links to some of the good work being done.
Cool, thank you. And over to you, Maria. What do you think is next for 2020, specifically looking at changes upcoming regarding AML and KYC? From your perspective?
Yeah, Ian touched a very important subject concerning the travel rule, and I know that Crypto UK did an enormous job and great work in terms of their writing the comments on the consultation. So I would say that if travel rule will be implemented, I totally agree that we definitely need this technology and blockchain technology using into during the travel rule implementation. For example, if there are different kind of risks. For example, risks to individual privacy during the implementation of the travel rule. So different kind of hacks of the personal information and so far, so on. So that's definitely going to be a big challenge for the whole industry. So, like every year, I usually say during the conferences that the next year is going to be the year of the regulation. And I hope for that, but, nothing really big happens because, usually I work for the exchange, and what we care about is, the volumes, the VIP traders who bring the commissions to the exchanges. And of course, while there is no regulation, there is no protection of the investors, institutional investors, to the fullest extent. We can't really have these big volumes. We're still at a very early stage of the regulation. So I think that if the regulation will be strengthened, we will definitely see bigger volume and more stabilized market. What else? I also think that basically, if we see the regulation that will be implemented, not only the AML regulation, but like crypto registration, like it's in now in the UK, we will definitely see their proper bank relations, because at the moment, even being registered in the UK, for example, and having some license in the European countries, you can't really have proper bank relations because banks are still very afraid of communicating with the crypto exchanges. And despite the fact, as I mentioned, that we ask for source of funds, we do the full KYC, they're still very afraid. And as Ian also mentioned, sometimes we do better checks than payment systems, but nobody believes us. Nobody really thinks that we do that. For example, when we have the talks with the compliance and the banks, the compliance of the banks, they usually really they don't understand how we do all these checks. But Richard, our compliance officer, is usually, but we do all these checks. So for them, it's a new sphere. They don't understand it, and I feel like next year probably will be much of improvement in this sphere.
No, great, thanks. And Ian, what impact do you think that these changes will have on crypto exchanges, like what Maria has said? Sort of in addition to banking, where do you see things going and changing? I mean, you've touched on regulators encroaching on some of the exchanges that have been more hesitant at going near AML and KYC checks, to word that diplomatically.
Don't get me started on banking relationships in the UK for crypto businesses. It's not only just corporate relationships, it's also retail transactions that are getting halted, blocked. It's a problem. We're working with UK Finance, which is the UK's largest trade body for financial services, to really try and educate and help them understand what the issues are, and both for retail and corporate. I do think that once the regulations are in place, this will provide greater comfort to compliance teams in banks to onboard crypto. They're dead scared at the moment. Compliance teams just look at the risks that they perceive, that it's global in nature. There's pseudo anonymity. There's no frictions. We don't know the source of funds. There's this whole compliant liquidity question mark that is an issue. But I do believe that when the money laundering regulations in the UK, the FCA is fully up and running, plus the travel rule I mentioned, it's a hope, but I think there needs to be more work done to educate teams in banks as to some of the things we've mentioned, the greater checks, the technology supports, understanding the transaction history, et cetera, and the tools we have to block and to stop illicit transactions and blacklist wallets and even cancel tokens. We've seen this with such aspects as the ransomware of the Colonial Pipeline in the US and the Polychain hack. The crypto community has a great ability to thwart criminal activity, even ahead of traditional financial sector. So it's about educating policymakers and those folks in these compliance teams.
All right, no, great, thanks. And over to you, Maria, just as a last question, what impact do you think the changes will have on crypto exchanges such as EXMO and others going forward?
Yeah, what is interesting that a few years ago when we introduced the mandatory verification, we expected that, and it happened. Like half of our users just went away because they didn't want to go to pass through KYC. But at the moment, we experience that more and more users are willing to do the KYC checks, and they feel confident, and they feel they feel cared about, and they love that. They love that we do KYC. They love that we actually can retrieve their password if they lose it, for example. They love that, if something happens, if somebody will hack their wallet or something like that, like steal their password, we can actually help them. And this is what matters. And I think that the market is becoming more grown up. And I feel like, the next year will become a new year in crypto. And I think that all the audience, not only the institutional traders, but retail traders, we understand that those KYC and AML checks, they actually, they're beneficial for them. And of course, there will be always the audience who will be trading on some gray exchanges. But I think the majority will get the fact that actually it's very beneficial for them. So I think that, the next year will become, more grown up for the crypto sphere.
No, I totally agree with you. And I mean, it was only a couple of years ago when you looked at, I think it's fair to say the majority of crypto exchanges, and it was about 50-50 if they would exit scam or be hacked or disappear or whatever, because there was so much, chaos and lack of structure in the market. And now it's much more secure, and also looking at the user experience to attract more people, more retail users, more institutional users as well. So it's a space that we can see from every angle, evolving incredibly quickly and really exciting to be a part of. So Ian and Maria, thank you so much for joining us, and giving up your very precious and limited time to join us in this. Really grateful to you. And big thanks again to TrueLayer for sponsoring this series.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you. See you soon.